I'm Nic Adler. I'm the owner here at the Roxy Theatre in Los Angeles on the Sunset Strip. Roxy in the early days was the larger venue. Was a venue where an act would play maybe for 4 or 5 days, even up to 2 weeks. And you don't see that as much anymore because there's not the money that's involved with staying in a place for 7 days. People want to go in, get the money, and play at a large venue, maybe House of Blues, maybe even Universal Amphitheater. They're not taking the time to play the smaller places like the Roxy, which we've become now. We're the intimate club. We're the place that you play down to, that maybe the artist comes back to. A lot of the artists that played and started at the Roxy seem to want to come back and play a smaller room, kind of remember their roots. And it's really about, in LA, the Roxy it's the root. There's the whiskey, there's the Roxy, Troubadour, that are kind of the roots of the music scene in the Sunset Strip and Hollywood. And so many bands have started here. And I don't say they finish here, but they definitely come back. And it's not their primetime show, it's not their forum show, it's not their Staples Center, but it's almost more special. As it is to the people watching the show, it's special to the artists too, because you can see it. They love to come back. They love the interaction. I always say at the Roxy, you're not at the show, you're part of the show. And so it's one of those places where you become an integral part of the show. These days, we do about 3 nationals a week. And a national would be a touring band that has some money behind them, that has some press behind them. We usually do 3 of those a week, and then the rest of the time is either 3 or 4 days of the local shows. Or we'll do what the Roxy's also been known for is we've done a lot of plays here, musicals, and really was not just about bands, but about any kind of performance here. We've done many comedy shows, some, Sam Kinison, Robin Williams. We've done some great comedy. We did recently. We did the Pussycat Dolls here. We did Hedwig. So it's not only the music venue. It was about being a place that could transform itself with any artist that came in here, and it was about that artist that night. So one night you could have Guns N' Roses, and the next night you could have Tracy Chapman, and it both worked for both artists. From the early days, it opened with Neil Young opened the club in September of 1973. And from there we had greats like Bob Marley recorded an album here in, I think it was 76. We had a great shows with Bruce Springsteen here, some real memorable shows. The Clash. Moving into people like Tracy Chapman had their first show here, Guns N' Roses, Jane's Addiction, and it seems like the Roxy goes in these almost graduating classes of like every 6 years we kind of move into a new kind of music or a new generation almost of music, and so we would move from maybe Jane's Addiction, Red Hot Chili Peppers, into Nirvana, into Rage Against the Machine, into System of a Down and Incubus, into that time. And then even from there, graduating to Phantom Planet and Maroon 5 and, up to where we are today with, who knows who it's going to be tomorrow. But it always seems every 3 or 4 years we get a good 3 or 4 bands that come out of the Roxy. I think many times, or many places that have the same situation of the Roxy is time. And there's a lot of places don't last, things don't last. But the Roxy has seemed to lasted for 30 years. And good times, bad times, location. We happen to have one of the greatest locations in the world, the Sunset Strip. It's something that's known for music. So it's almost a perfect home for the Roxy or any venue. I mean, if you think about it, there's not many businesses that have been around 30, 35 years, 40 years. And on the same street, you have the Whiskey that's been here since 64. You have the Roxy that's been here since 73. You have the Rainbow, which maybe isn't about bands performing, but it's a place that they go. It's a gathering for musicians and artists, and they feel comfortable there. And they've been there for 40 years. So you do have a really comfortable place for artists to come. And we really try to push the family vibe out of the Roxy. It's about, we're a family, and if you played here 20 years ago or you played here last week, you've played the Roxy, and it's almost like an alumni, and you're an alum of the Roxy. And you see people come in that haven't played here in 30 years, and they walk around like it was yesterday, and they'll tell you the stories. And I think stories and people talking about it is key to the Roxy being around, is that it hasn't left people's thoughts yet. You know, it's not something that's, oh, well, yeah, it used to be like that. Well, it's actually like that last week. I mean, Sting played here about 2 or 3 months ago. So you have you keep it up. We haven't let it die, because we can put whatever we want in here because people want to play it. But two, the people want to come see things at the Roxy. It's as special to maybe see your artist anywhere, but it's almost more special to see that artist at the Roxy. Oh, I saw them at the Roxy. It's almost like an added bonus to seeing that artist. Well, you have the majority of the music industry, and maybe not country, but besides country, you have the majority of the industry here within 10 miles of the Roxy. So, you know, half the battle is getting someone to come to your show to get signed, or to, you know, buy a label, or whatever the next step for that band is. You know, it's right here. So that's key to have people, you know, to move to the next level would be also our relationship with the label. As the Roxy, we have relationships with all the labels. It's very easy for them to call up and say, we want to throw in our band here tonight, or do you have a slot open next week? For example, Audio Slave, when before their record came out, they hadn't played a show anywhere. They called up and said, hey, what's your earliest band go on? And we said, I think 8:15. And they go, oh, well, we want to come in and play at 7:30. And they just showed up, no sound check, just like a local band, and jumped up. And it was that easy for them to do that. It's that easy for the label to call us and say, we got someone we want to put in there. Or also for the bands, it's like, hey, we're playing at the Roxy. The label goes, oh, wow, you know, we feel comfortable. It's something easy. We can go to the Rainbow, grab something to eat, come over here. It's not a big deal. It's something very familiar to most people in the music industry to come see a band at the Roxy. Pay to play is a term that is used a lot, maybe here on the Strip at the 500 seat venue clubs. But pay to play, it's basically pay to play would be if a band paid $400 to come play here and they didn't show up with anybody. I mean, there are bands that do that. They pay $400 or $500 to come play here. That's not what we ask from our bands. We ask them to buy your tickets from us and then go out on the street and sell your tickets and turn around and make a couple $100 for the band. But also, it gives them the power to meet the people on the street. And it's not like you're just, oh, we're playing the Roxy, come down, and hoping people show up. You actually have to go out there as a band and do groundwork and hand-to-hand combat and hand these people a ticket and get their money. And they see you, and they see in your eyes that you're hungry. And so the pay-to-play thing, some people think it's a bad thing. I actually personally think it's a way to encourage bands to not be lazy, to not just say, you know, here's a flyer, come see us, but actually do some work to make sure that person's coming down. And all the great bands, I mean, we really didn't start pay-to-play or pre-sale tickets, is what we call them here, until about the early 90s. And bands like System of a Down, first night they played here, they did pay-to-play. Second night they did pay-to-play. And then the third night they got $200 from us. And then the next time they got $500. And then before we knew it, they were selling it out. And all the bands that came after the 90s, they all did that. And I think it's part of the reason that all those bands, Incubus, System, Phantom Planet, they have such a street level credibility, and that's because they started right there on the street. The bigger bands are, we have a national booker here. We have a local, two local, well, we have a local, a semi-local, and a national. And the local booker deals with getting the packages from the kids every day, going through them, listening to it. The next level booker really is getting a vibe of what's the next band that's kind of coming up on the local level. And then the national, Nikki, she what's the hot band? What's the band in 2 months that's going to be, their record's coming out and they're going to be number one, or who's the hot song on the radio, or that's really her job. And we're paying those artists to come here and play. The main way would be to submit your package. Internet, having a website, great website, has really meant a lot more in the last couple of years for us at the Roxy in terms of booking more than even a package. I think we're just kind of still doing the packages because that's the way we have been doing it, but I've noticed more and more in our local booking department that we're just saying, hey, do you have a website? Instead of saying, hey, send us the package, because it's all about time. To put the package together might take you a week, to put it in the mail, to do all this. You have a website, you have music to download, you have instant images, you have things that we can relate to automatically, to say, okay, well, we have a show where we can put you in, and we're not waiting for a package, we're not going through packages, we're not putting cassettes in tape decks and trying to rewind and fast forward. It's the song they want us to hear is right there. So it really allows the artist to set it up so that we know what they want us to see. Because a lot of times with the packages, it's not maybe I'll look at the picture first, or maybe I'll put in the video first, or maybe I'll read this. But when you present it as a package on the internet, you really tell me how you want me to see the band. And that seems like it's been a big difference to do that.
What do you look for when you set for this package?
Some kind of, I think the first thing that comes up is some type of quality. Is really what goes through the office first, because there's a lot of times we open the packages, and I'm not saying we laugh at bands or laugh at artists or laugh at packages, but there are some packages that are pretty humorous. I mean, they're handwritten, or they're a tape that was recorded over, or so you see that right away, and you kind of say, well, if they're not putting everything into their package, because this speaks for them, so they're really not saying much. If the package isn't quality, if the parts aren't in there, if it doesn't look good. I mean, that's really what we're in the industry. We're in an entertainment industry, and it's about how it looks and how it sounds and the production value and all those things. And I think the quality packages, or the internet websites that have quality music and is done well, those are the ones that we kind of really look to first. It's just, I think, the age that we're in today. Usually, if they have a booking agent or a manager, then they're a national. They would be more with a national booker. I don't think I've been a manager myself for bands. I think you can really wait to do a booking agent. To have a booking agent before your time to have one, I think can hurt you, because you also have someone else that's working for you that might be working on other projects or other things. It's not. I think the bands that have the heart and the soul and that push and push and push by themselves, until they get to the point to where they need that booking agent, because there's a point you don't need it. If you're doing local shows around Los Angeles, and even if you're doing it on the West Coast, or even if you're doing it across the U.S., it's really, you can call the venue and say, we're driving through and we're in a van, and do you have a slot on this day? And I don't think you really need a booking agent. I think when you're at the point when you have a record ready to go, when you have some press behind you and you need exposure, I think that's the point you go to a booking agent. But before that, I know that if a local band came to us with a booking agent, I think they might get caught in a nowhere land between the local booker and the national going, well, what do you have going on? And then they're like, nothing really. And then, so it goes back to the local booker, but they don't really deal with the agents. So there's a time and a place for an agent. The role of the venues changed because there is so much music, there is so much content, there is so much recorded material that I think people are almost overwhelmed, that there's so much radio. You can hear the song 10 times on the radio. You can see the video 10 times. You're getting the same thing. It's almost becoming monotonous, to where as a live show is just that. Anything can happen. The guitar player can mess up. He could play something that he's never played before. The singer can sing in a different way. It's a one-time experience each time you come to a live show. So I think that's key about live venues is you're getting something that no one else has, and we're in an age that there's so much out there that everyone really has access to it. But did you make it to the show at the Roxy, the sold out so-and-so show? No, I didn't. Oh, well, what an amazing show. I saw this. And really the only way to retell it is through a story. It's not like you can go get it on the internet or you can get it on a video. It was a one-time thing, and you were part of that. And I think that's probably why. I've noticed that they are. I think more and more you notice today with more corporate places like House of Blues that they're not genre specific, or larger venues, arenas or sheds, or once you get bigger than 400 or 500 seaters, I think they're less genre specific. But the Roxy, when it opened, was not genre specific, and I think the whiskey wasn't. But you can notice over time that places will take on what's around them, and it happened to be rock and roll was around the whiskey, the Roxy, the Troubadour. So those places kind of went more rock and roll than maybe something else. And even within rock and roll, I mean, the Troubadour is a little bit more. Now they're a little bit more indie. Within rock and roll, they're a little more indie. The Roxy is a little more glamorous, a little more glitzy, Sunset Strip, a little more. It might be a little more famous, but you get a little bit more out of it. So within even a certain genre, there are bands that won't play the Roxy because they want to be more street and they don't want to play the glitzy Roxy. They want to play maybe the down and dirty Troubadour. And I was saying earlier, we've really tried to not make the Roxy genre specific, but with local bands, and you only have 3 nationals a week. You're doing, I don't know, you're doing 4, maybe 4 or 5 nights a week with local bands, and you can only really take what's out there, and what's out there in LA, and also it's 500 seats. So what's going to bring in 500 seats? A coffee house style acoustic act, or hair and glam and rock and roll, and that's going to bring in more people. It's a little more intimate to go to a coffee house, and you might want that. But I think when you go to the Roxy, you want the full experience, and it seems like you get that a little bit more from loud rock and roll music. I grew up running around the Roxy. It was my father started the Roxy in the early 70s, and it actually started with the Rocky Horror Show, the play. He had brought it over from England, and that ran the first 8 months that we were actually open. So it actually started as a theater, and then as that left, we moved into booking rock acts. But he started it in the early 70s and was hands-on, but really with the Rainbow and the Roxy and the whiskey, they were it was a family business, all 3, and they kind of ran themselves within each other, shifting people around. So I would basically be picked up from school, and this was my afternoon daycare. It would be to sit and watch the band sound check, and I'd go over to the Rainbow Kitchen and maybe throw a couple pizzas around and back and forth between, and then the show would start, and maybe that night my mom didn't pick me up, and I'd be running around through people's legs and running on stage and running off stage. So I really grew up as the Roxy being my home as much it is a place for my father's work. It was just something that I was really used to, and I didn't really know anything different also. This was just where I came at the end of the day. So also I was real rebellious to rock and roll music, because it was all rock and roll. It was about heavy metal. And especially during the 80s when I grew up, it was all about heavy metal and Guns N' Roses. And I was like, I just wanted to be the opposite. So I got into hip hop and R&B and maybe classic R&B and just anything that wasn't rock. And I really thought I wouldn't come back to the Roxy. I felt like that's my dad's thing. That's there. It's part of our family, but not something that I wanted to be part of. And it just came a day when my dad called and he's like, I need you to go down to the Roxy and do some work. And I ended up staying and taking it over at that point. And I already had heard every excuse about whatever, and I had seen every band play already, and I had seen the whole place work my whole life, so it was a very easy thing for me to jump into. Of course, I learned stuff that first day that I had no idea. I'd only seen the other side of it. And I left after working here for a couple of years to become a manager, and I managed 3 or 4 bands. And I got to see it from the other side of the band side, which is a totally different side than the owner or even as a customer, because I had seen so many shows here. So there's really 3 sides. There's the venue side about it's a business. It's about making money and really about making money at the end of the day. And the consumer is about coming here to have a great show. And then you have the band side, which is they're in it to make money, but they're also there to kind of progress their career. And managing really opened my eyes up to what happens when you're on the road for maybe 3 months and you show up in Kansas and they pull up the roll-up door of the venue, and you walk in and the sound guy's grumpy and the cables don't work and there's no bathrooms, and just these little teeny things was a wake-up call for me, because I felt like, it's perfect at the Roxy, but I had never really seen that side of it. So when I stopped managing and came back to the Roxy, I really took the Roxy from the manager side and said, well, what is the band seeing when they first get here at the Roxy? What are the things? Because what we noticed was once the bands were happy, they were telling their agents that they were happy, and the agent was like, oh, that's great. They were booking another act, and it was a perpetual thing from there. But I think it was really important to see it from the other side. There's so many different sides of the music industry. I'm happy that I'm on the side that I'm on. I'm not a big fan of the record companies. I understand that they're going through some changes right now with more of the internet and finding out how they're going to get their music out there. But I think that the corporate environment is not good for music. It's mass marketing music, I don't think is good, just because it really loses what the music is all about, and it becomes more about maybe image, which is important. But if we're talking about music itself, I think that it really distracts from what the actual music is about, what the artist is about. It's really what the label wants to make them about. And of course, we're in the business to make money, and as a club, I'm in the business. But I think that the labels have hurt the industry more than it's helped the industry. In the last couple of years, being a manager, I've seen a lot of bands put their heart and soul into records, and maybe because they don't have the right single or the right image, the record never gets released. And I'm happy to see the environment changing to where someone can record their own music and there's a way to get it out to everyone, because then it's about the music and it's about the artist, and it's not so much about what this person looks like or what their values are or whatever, but it's about what they're playing. And well, it's a hard thing. It's a business, but I think you'd probably have to think of the two, out of the 3 things that I think are important, the business itself, the consumer, and the band, you'd have to take maybe the business out of the equation for the minute and say, well, what do the bands need first? Because if you don't have bands, then you don't have a venue. So you got to make sure your sound system's, the best or as best as you can get it. The lighting is as best as you can get it. The decor, the feeling, down to the dressing rooms. That's an important thing. It's how the band spends their time. They only spend 30 minutes or 45 minutes on stage, and the rest of the 8 hours they're either walking around the venue or they're staying in the dressing room. So knowing what the band's needs are crucial. And then on the other side, the customer, can they see? Is there a good viewing angles? Are the drinks priced right? Is the ticket priced right? Those things are important too. Because it's just like you want the band to come back, you want the consumer to come back. And then at the end, you have to go back to the business and say, is my ticket price right? Am I making enough at the bar? Are my employees being taken care of? Because those things, especially in this, is there's a lot of contact between people here. The security, they have to talk to someone at the front. They have to talk to someone at the front door when they walk in. Maybe they're standing in the aisles, or they ask where the restroom is, or there's a lot of interaction. You go to the bartender, you go get your merchandise. It's not like a supermarket where you get your cart and it's about you and what you're putting into it. There's a lot of other things that come into play. So those things are really important to make sure that the employees are happy, that they smile, that they're giving you a good experience. I mean, that's really key is the experience, because it's not a one-time thing. It's about, are they going to come back next week? Are they going to come back in 5 years? And what we found out is now, not only do we have the parents coming back, but we have their kids coming back, and we almost have 3 generations of kids here at the Roxy, from the adult down to the kids. Well, those bands have quality. Really, I mean, when you're dealing with, we do maybe 4 or 5 bands a night, 5 days a week. That's 20 bands times, 4 weeks. That's 80 bands, and before you know it, you're doing 800, 900 bands a year. Usually, when you deal in things like that, the quality kind of floats to the top. So a lot of those bands have quality, and another thing that those bands have is heart, right? Just this passion to excel. I mean, not accepting 2 flyers handed out, but 20 flyers or 200 flyers. Or there's the bands that I notice are the guys, when I leave, they're out there passing out flyers every night, the same guy. And I just go to myself, how does this guy just come here every night at 2 a.m. and sit out here and pass out flyers? And because there's this want, there's this urge to see what the next level is, and I think they realize that that's their way to the top, and they really use the Roxy as a vehicle to get them there. And also, they're great musicians. I mean, we come from a place in Los Angeles where there's a lot of music, and even from the schools, there's a lot of magnet schools that have musicians, and there's the Musicians Institute, and there's a lot of schools, and so you're in a pool of people where you might have, it might be better than in Salt Lake City, where maybe there's not so many musicians, and that's why there isn't 10 bands maybe coming out of Salt Lake every year or every 2 years. But in LA there's bands coming out signed every day. There's probably a band signed in LA, and that's because they get to come to the Roxy and they get to see what that big band is doing. They get to see what the national band is doing, and they get to leave and go to their rehearsal studio and be like, oh my God, I saw Mikey from Incubus do this, and let's try this, and it's in front of them. It's very accessible. It'd be like wanting to be a basketball player and being able to go to every single practice and in game, and you'd probably be a pretty good basketball player after experiencing those things. Well, I've noticed we've started using some interns here at the Roxy, and they come from USC. And I think that that's a great first step, is that they're answering the phone, they're seeing what people want, they're watching the shows get booked. That's one angle, and they're all musicians, and it happens to be at the Roxy. Is probably 90% of the people that work here, maybe besides the security guards, are musicians. All the bookers are musicians. Everyone here is a musician that works here. All our bookers, our management, they all play. They play on other nights at other clubs. So, just going down to your local club and saying, can I pass out some flyers? And maybe you put me on the list, and maybe start with some promotion. And that way you get a grasp of what it takes to get people in. Once you get that, you can kind of bring your own music and start promoting yourself. And then you start promoting yourself at that venue. And you just never stop. You just keep kind of building layers on top of layers until, I've seen it many times until you sell out the Roxy, and then a week later you're number one on the charts. And I've seen it many times. I mean, and I've seen it many times. A lot of my friends have 6 of them show up in their van and that's broken down with 3 wheels, and a year later they come back in their Mercedes and they got big smiles on their faces and houses, and they can write any kind of music they want, and they can play anywhere they want. And so it's definitely doable, all the way from passing out a flyer to selling millions of records. It's definitely doable.